To have now, the South African Human Rights Commission has reportedly received about 230 cases of racism since the Penny Sparrow incident in January. Government, on the other hand, is set to roll out an aggressive plan to tackle the scourge of racism. For more on this, we are joined in studio this morning by the head of Advocacy and Communications for the South African Human Rights Commission, Gail Smith. It's good to have you, Gail. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program.
Thanks, Leanne.
All right, 230 cases of racism. Have you noticed, has there been an uptick since the same period the previous year?
You know, because of social media, every time there's a conflagration on social media, the public, catches wind of the issue, so it seems that there is. But racism is a consistent issue that we have to deal with throughout the year. So the issues that happen on social media, on Twitter and Facebook, sort of create, a public panic and awareness of it. But the issue is something that we deal with consistently throughout the year.
So this is a very familiar pattern. It's not something that is suddenly getting out of control this year, because it almost feels that way.
No, this is our core work. I mean, our mandate is to promote the respect for human dignity, and we are finding that a lot of our complaints relate to human dignity, and it will be variables, race and gender, race and religion, race and a whole range of things. So racism as such is something that is part of all of the complaints that we deal with at the South African Human Rights Commission.
Yeah, because I can imagine it just forms like one big ball that keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, you get Penny Sparrow, then somebody else is going to say something against her, and then against him, and against her, and it just becomes something that is out of control. But how are we doing? I mean, can we say in a way that it is getting a little bit out of hand? How do we curb it? What are your views on this?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's getting out of hand. I think that there are deep structural issues in our country that have a bearing on race that continue to plague us. So it's not that we're getting out of hand, it's that we are trying to come to terms with our past and to build the future that, our Constitution envisages. So, it's a constant process. Most South Africans don't know their rights. Most South Africans don't understand the Constitution. And so people are presenting at our offices with a whole range of complaints, relating to culture, disability, ethnic origin, etc., and they all do have a bearing on race. How are we doing? It's hard to say. We do deal with a whole range of complaints, and I think that it's unfortunate that the social media race complaints tend to take all the oxygen out of the debate. There are other debates around race that are happening. A lot of the racism complaints impact children. And I think what people don't understand is that when a child is confronted with racism in the classroom from an authority figure, that has a direct impact on that child's ability to learn and long-term education. We're concerned with people's socioeconomic rights. When you affect a child's education in the most basic phase, it does have a knock-on effect throughout their lives. Yeah. And so there are other issues related to race, but we often do over-focus on the social media complaints.
Indeed, that's out there in the public. I mean, and that's something that people are more aware of, as opposed to what may happen in a school environment, which is a big issue. How much power does the South African Human Rights Commission have? A lot of people feel like it's a toothless dog, and yes, we report it to you, you investigate it, and then what? The perpetrators just walk away with maybe a little slap on the wrist. What happens?
No, not necessarily. Look, I mean, there has to be due process. I think that because so much of this happens on social media, people expect swift justice and they expect people to be drawn and quartered at dawn. We don't operate like that. That's not fair. We have to treat all of the complaints fairly. So irrespective of whether it's a CEO of a company or a farm worker, they have as much standing, they have equal standing in the face of the Human Rights Commission. I think what a lot of people don't understand is that, how many people are we in this country? About 45 million. The Human Rights Commission has a staff of about 207 nationally. Sure. So these are people who are at the coalface, And I think that, again, back to the sort of preferential treatment that people in urban areas expect. A lot of people that are suffering at the coalface of racism don't have electricity, don't have access to email, don't have access to all of the sort of furbelows of modernity that we have in the cities. So they are able to make themselves vocal and they're able to make themselves heard. Our mandate really is to promote respect for human rights, and that means that we are the first port of call for a whole range of things. We can't deal with everything because that's not within our mandate. We have to pass on to other Chapter 9s complaints that don't necessarily fit into our mandate.
Let's talk about criminalising racial comments and racism. Do you think this will assist?
I beg your pardon?
Criminalising
it. I don't think criminalising it will. I mean, if you look at our court system at the moment, they're completely overburdened as it is. I don't know that that is necessarily the correct remedy. I also think that, we lean more towards sort of trying to mediate and to educate people about human rights so that people understand why it is an affront to someone's dignity when you use a racial epithet.
Yeah.
So criminalising it, people assume that you'll have safe justice, but you just have to see the backlog at the courts at the moment to recognize that that's not going to be a quick fix to our problem.
It's deeper
We're also
that.
a lot of us are very ignorant about our rights, a lot of us are very ignorant about our past, and a lot of our work is really educating people about their rights.
Yeah, I mean, I know the latest one that you got was the Matthew Tennyson comments that he made, and that's in your books as well.
That is being dealt with by the Commission at the moment. The problem with social media, of course, is that people assume that it's private, but it's not, it's public. And I think that, all South Africans are enjoined by the Constitution to be conscious of other people's human rights and dignity. And it's, you can't assume, that you're in a safe space and you can say what you want. We have to be cognizant of other people's rights.
Good lesson on this morning, where we certainly don't want to be going out there and saying anything harsh. I mean, it's when you publish something, I think the best advice I heard is if you put something on social media, be prepared to have it on a billboard. That's what you've got to think every time you post something. So the contact details of the Human Rights Commission?
You can reach us through our website, which is www.sahrc.org.za.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gail Smith, for joining us here. SAHRC spokesperson, talking to us about the cases of racism that they've gotten since Penny Sparrow. They've had 230 reported cases so far this year. All right, it is 7 o'clock.